we basically got roughly 75 pages, mostly from Eric and yours drafts just before the Midwest meeting. What that mostly missing was this. So I would say these could come in as boxes with very brief reference to them in the text.
Yeah.
To sort of link.
And then the idea was we would have a couple of these for like maybe one or two for each hypothesis, just to kind of explain how it works in context.
Yeah, I wouldn't mean each hypothesis is 15. I'd say that's too much. So I'd say I'd focus more on the interesting story. That is what and how. That is, don't make it so. That is, your style is too much to sort of straight, standard, follow a sort of standard bureaucratic rule. I would say try to use the cases to illustrate some of that, but add nuance. I mean, for instance, BBC went to Nebraska and they interviewed the farmers, and the conflict, the interesting conflict, which made it interesting, was the so-called narrow self-interest of the beef farmers, the cattlemen, was to sell beef at a higher price. But 80% of them voted against Clinton and voted for Trump, even though Trump said he was against. Okay, so the interview focused on sort of playing off the multiple dynamics, and that's what a case study can do in ways that we can't do that in great detail. But I'm making the point that we want to add to our story somehow beyond the propositions, and especially the big thing that we want to show is the interactions of why you get contradictions among some of those propositions, and how they can be reconciled. And that, I mean, I don't have a good answer to that. That is I'm simplifying, but one answer in terms of North Dakota is that the narrow selling of the beef at a certain price was trumped by the patriotism, the lifestyle, and the multiple other stylistic elements which seem to have been more favorable toward Trump, despite the beef price. And I'm not using the term economic. All of these can be labeled as economic or cultural or political, and they all overlap. That is how you put dollar value is an economic action, but it is founded on preferences, what the economists call preferences, or what others would call values or lifestyle or whatever else. Okay.
Can I read out, just not read it word for word, but just sort of explain like one of the examples I did here to see if I kind of have the right idea?
Go ahead.
So I was going through both the lists. A good one that came from Jacobs was Dubuque, Iowa. It's a small city in northern Iowa. Dubuque. Oh, is that how you pronounce it? I have no idea. Jacob said he didn't know, so I just assumed. Dubuque, Iowa. Have you heard of this place?
Sure.
It's a beautiful town based on the pictures, but it's a small city in northern Iowa. It's bordering Wisconsin on the Mississippi River there, and it's very blue collar, and very, very white. And they basically voted Democrat because, like blue collar workers traditionally do, every single presidential election since Eisenhower. And they just flipped to Trump this past election.
Significantly too, like there was a big swing.
Like every single part of the county was red. So when we analyzed this, we found that poverty in the area has increased by like 5% in the past 2 years. Unemployment has skyrocketed, and that fit like directly into our second hypothesis, which was white manufacturing towns traditionally vote with Democrat, but when you interact it with the scenic levels, which is like the poverty, the unemployment, et cetera, it would manifest itself in Trump voting. So we basically just explained that. We're like, this perfectly demonstrates our hypothesis. Here's why. Is that's sort of what we were looking for the case studies?
Generally, yes. If we could add someone who is thoughtful and informed, who says this, I mean, what you get to a bottom line and says because. Who says because?
Because what do you mean? Like they voted Trump because of the poverty?
Yes.
Isn't that or hypotheses that are arguing with that? I mean, so
I want a mayor or a local political scientist who knows Dubuque and who says Dubuque did it for this reason, not you from the outside imputing it.
Okay.
That's what gives it local authenticity.
I can try looking for like interviews and
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah, we could.
But that's what Jacob has got, you see, if he's getting these case studies from the journalist, this is what the journalist should do, and that's why I'm saying don't go to the census, because the census won't give you a local informant. You gotta have the
Yeah.
local, I mean, a good journalist will spend, 2 months doing a good case study.
Okay.
Okay.
What about?
But,
I see
but
some-
in general, yes, I mean, in general, that sounds great.
I found an article here on CNN talking specifically about Dubuque, and it's like interviewing about the townspeople. Is that like what you're looking for? Like explaining like why they would decide to
If
become for
someone-
Trump?
You hear my question and you're not answering, I mean, do they say why they voted for Trump?
Right. Yeah. So they're interviewing them, asking them why they were voting. Yeah.
Read the answers.
Okay. I will start doing so.
Okay. But ideally, a more informed, not just an average citizen, but ideally someone who's more informed.
Okay.
But I mean, it could be a smart average citizen is great. That is an informed, thoughtful, reflective average citizen, but would be fine. Or someone who has a position like a city hall reporter or mayor or head of a leading civic association. And these are who typically the journalists go to.
Okay.
Okay, so yes, I mean, your general strategy sounds good. I mean, you've got great results in a short period of time. All good, so cheers.
Okay. Should we talk about what we want to do for next week?
Sure. What we have in mind?
Spit out, Jacob.
results?
Yeah, I was able to do the regression Mary asked me.
No. George Tully.
No,
Missed
I
it.
left messages with both his secretary and I found his office phone number and you couldn't contact either. So I
Okay,
left
so you did find his office phone number?
Yes.
Okay, well, I've sent him, I mean, he says,
I looked him up in the directory and they had his phone number there.
okay, but something's wrong. He said he called, that we'd be talking in second. So,
His phone number went straight to voicemail.
okay, hi Terry, I've been regretting the delay in getting back to you. Let me suggest joining for a while at 6 p.m. tomorrow by Skype. By chance, Gunders Ritzes, if we work on a paper together, probably on quality of life, which we'd greatly appreciate visiting with you for at least a few minutes, regardless if we're interested in the theory of scenes. You get to check in. I'll email you tomorrow with a telephone. You can reach us by Skype. Okay, but that was 4:45, unless he's a day off.
Let me give it to you later.
Sorry. So I wrote down what's your Skype address, trying to reach you now. Okay, well, we've done all I can. Now, the only thing is I gave my home phone. Let's push on. We got things here. So yes, and this is critical timing for all of you. He's got to leave soon. I mean, I think you're a main event. So maybe we ought to let the two others talk and then come back and then we'll just continue with Trump as long as it makes sense. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah.
Okay. Ben.
Yeah, so Mary was very helpful and she basically coached me for 2 days straight on how to do a fixed effects regression. I was able to do that with time and politician fixed effects variables. I ran that regression, wrote a draft paper involving that. Yeah, I'm planning on having a draft of the paper for our urban innovation class done by Monday. Regarding the general theories applicable that we talked about last week. But I spent most of the last in the last week, my main focus was on just accomplishing the regression results. For the regression I ran using keywords to predict tweet count. I have to see if I can satisfy the linearity and parameters assumption, but apart from that, I have all the other OLS regression assumptions satisfied. And it seems like a solid,
What's the substantive concept? Why that regression?
well, I mean, my basic hypothesis was that I thought that politicians who tweeted about national issues may care more about discussing those.
You say local politicians?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who are discussing those issues and want to sort of do it in a forum where they can reach out to people more easily and discuss them, because not necessarily all these issues, like for example the Muslim ban stuff. The local population may not care as much about it, so they may use Twitter as a way of sort of sharing that more. So I hypothesize that they would have higher tweet count with large, more frequency of keyword usage of the national issues.
Wait. If you care about local issues, why are you gonna bother to refute the national issues at all? You just deal with the local issues.
Well, I wasn't.
That is, my instinctive, simple counter hypothesis is completely the opposite of what I think you're saying. Isn't it?
Can you repeat it again?
If I don't care about national issues, I don't tweet about them. I just talk about local garbage, the local park, the local neighborhood association, and we don't talk about nationalism or culture, or multiculturalism, or diversity at all. You're saying if you, okay. I think that is, so I'm not saying you or I should choose or say one is right or wrong. I'm simply saying articulate, elaborate why Proposition 1 versus Proposition 2, which may be the opposite, versus Proposition 3, and think more that through before you just throw them in a model.
Yeah,
And ideally, write it out. And say why that fits Theory 1 or Theory 2 or Theory 3.
I think that's gonna be one of my goals between now and Monday. So, trying to put that.
Yes, you can run a regression which includes these from a statistical standpoint. You just choose anything out of the air. But for our political theorists, political leaders, people who care and we're doing about this, why are they going to bother to read you, or more generally us? It's not just you. That is, we're all trying to say something new and different and better than the Wall Street Journal, and to explain Trump to himself. Okay. But yes, that's ambitious for sure, but we can do it.
Yeah, so, those are all good questions and fair criticism.
And you've been reading books for the whole quarter. You haven't done any new regressions to speak of. You haven't done any new field work or whatever. You've been reading just to do this. Do it now.
Yeah,
I mean, those books are written by the smartest political scientists in the country who are trying to help you state exactly what I'm saying, I think.
well, I'm gonna have done by Monday.
Okay.
So I plan to come to office hours with the, first draft.
Good.
So, I'm gonna need more time between now and then to sit down and do it. So until then, I guess I don't have anything else new to report. But Monday is my deadline for getting the initial draft of the paper done. Yeah, and I'm also presenting Monday. So I'm probably gonna send a draft of it to, Antoine before I present, just to make sure he's comfortable with what I put forward.
Maybe send to me too?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll send it to both of you, and as well as the,
But that is, I think I hear the same basic idea as you had in January. And that is you've read 2 or 3 or more books. What have you learned from the books which inform a more specific hypothesis?
well, I mean, so one of the things I learned about the way that mayors sort of structure their decision making, which I thought was important because it,
Okay, and that's from which book?
the mayor's in action.
Here's that. Okay, what's a bottom line? Okay, yes, that book I know well. Tell me a little bit more about the hypotheses and how you can get a hypothesis, a specific interesting hypothesis from that book that
So-
goes beyond what you've said.
the four major, they call them contextual variables that they state are like the mayor, the city, the agenda, and the network. And they talk about how mayors have basically three main tasks that they do. The three tasks are agenda setting, task accomplishment, and network building. And that these are sort of the internal processes of the mayor that they then use to relate to all these external things, meaning the network and the city and the agenda. And so when I think about that, one of the things I think about is obviously like branding in terms of that part of what a politician wants to do is create a brand and establish that branding with their constituency. And I think Mayhew's framework comes into there in terms of his.
Okay, but wait just a second. Stay with that book. I mean, that's fine as far as it goes. There's still zero content in terms of the appeal of an individual mayor or the style of one or another council member in a different city. That is, why are council members or cities different in terms of what's in that book?
You mean between the different cities?
And yes, and individual mayors. I mean, the core of the book is on differences among them, not similarities. What you gave is sort of a framework they all share.
So okay, so let me see if I'm understanding you correctly. So you're saying that I should be able to articulate how the local differences affect the characteristics of the mayors?
You're looking for propositions
Correct.
from the book.
Yes.
And the book has propositions in the sense that it shows types. And you haven't been able, at least you haven't said anything about those types. That's what I'm listening for. I'm trying to listen, I'm trying to encourage you, and I'm listening and saying, be more specific. And the specifics are, and I've said this to you twice orally, which is why I'm asking again, there are different types of mayors which are the core of the book. I mean, I'm the editor of the book series. I read the manuscript. I worked with the authors, professor at Harvard Business School. He worked with mayors at Harvard Business School, did case studies of these places in great detail. So we had a lot of good, rich case study material, on Dayton, Ohio, on Cincinnati, and so forth, and how the mayors were different in one place to the next. That's the core of the book. You haven't mentioned that.
So
But that should inform your propositions. You can build propositions from what he has there. That is, you haven't stated something in a regression format that would link with his case studies. And so you all should know what's the difference between Harvard and Chicago in terms of the professional schools, especially law school, business school, medical school, and as well as in feeding into the social sciences, the Harris School and public policy. What's the big difference? I don't know if it's for divinity or not. It would be interesting. You all should know this.
They have more money.
That's irrelevant. In terms of
Good
this,
try.
what's the intellectual? What's the core of the intellectual agenda? And it's not explained by money. In all those places, you were taught, you read, your textbooks are case studies. When you write a paper, it's a case study of General Motors, or of Mayor Koch, or of this or that. And you're taught to think in terms of, here's a case that we can try to use, and often the course ends there. I'm sketching, I'm exaggerating slightly, but not too much. In Chicago, if you take Economics 101, do you read cases? No. What do you get in Economics 101? Theory. Abstract propositions. Supply and demand, intersection, market clearing, balance. None of the case study stuff. So what I'm asking you to do is to join the two. Okay? Because you got a background in math, etc. from Caltech. You know the methods, and so maybe it's ambitious to join the two, because many of the faculty at Chicago and Harvard don't join each other, but we can. That is if we can use the best of the case study and build them into an op-ed piece, we can also have propositions which are the Chicago tradition.
Great.
So, for instance, if we say the Dayton, I can't remember the names of the cities which he has, but for instance, if we have one big type in terms of the differences, is some of the mayors are very local, very service-oriented, and very responsive to the citizens. If the citizen walks in the door and the citizen says, I need this, I need to have a pothole fixed in front of my house, the mayor says, yes, that's my job, I will do it for you.
Right.
Other mayors have, like, in contrast, sort of, I have a program for the city, I'm gonna so we, in the course we have the mayor of Oklahoma City who said, we're gonna take off weight. And the citizens of Oklahoma City lost 1 million pounds because of the walks, the organized walks. They had health fairs. They got people to, okay, that's a radically different agenda for one mayor or one council member. So I'm contrasting sort of top down versus bottom up. And you got those in your results in February or March. I'm trying to get you to go beyond that and interpret them more subtly, and then to add more categories because this is also true of presidents, of mayors, and national congressmen. And they have, I bet that if you look, the literature and other ways of coding the data will give us more tools to do this, which could be matched up with the Harvard case study.
Okay. I think I understand better what you do now.
Okay.
Sorry.
Eden, anything you want to talk about as you've been more busy with other stuff? Or let me add, if I haven't said it for all of you, we would be delighted if as many of you can continue during the summer as are available with work study. If you have it, if you don't, fine. We will continue meeting more or less weekly through the summer. You can work in absentia in California or whatever, part-time. Mary has done that for several summers. She had internships once in San Francisco, once in Washington, 40-hour-a-week jobs. She got tons of stuff done, even all around that. And you can potentially, even if you're eligible, get work study and have a full-time job in
It's also worth noting that if you don't qualify for work study during the normal school year, they're significantly more generous during the summer. Like, you can just kind of go and be like, hey, I have this job. I'm not going to be able to get the job unless I have work study. Can you do anything for me? And they'll say like no, and then a week later you just get an email saying like, you've been awarded work study. It's worked 3 years in a row for me. Like.
Okay, now that's very important. Okay, now that, I mean, I hadn't heard you say it quite that way before.
It's only true for the summer. It's
Okay,
not true
but
for
that's, I mean,
yeah.
but the summer you can work up to 40 hours. You see, during the year you can only work 15, so it's much bigger money during the summer. Okay, good point. Ian, what are your summer plans?
I think I'm gonna be just hanging around. I might go on a road trip.
Okay.
Essentially qualitative research.
But can you apply, or have you applied for work study?
I'm gonna look into it. I saw a couple things about like eligibility and like first year graduate students. They say aren't eligible, but I think I can probably get around that. So I'll do that.
You heard Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you read is probably divinity school, not the work study program.
No, it was just like on the normal the summer work study thing. It said at the bottom like first year grad students aren't given whatever work study with summer due to limited funds or something. But I have a feeling.
I never heard that before. So it may be that someone wrote that in the past when there were limited funds, but I certainly would apply.
Okay.
Yeah, and similarly, maybe you guys who have not gotten work study during the year, maybe apply now for the summer based on what Sam said. Okay. That is, I'm surprised at the numbers, at the proportions of you who don't have work study. In the past, I would say 80-90% of all the students in the USC who I talked with had work study. So I don't know if there is less money, or if they're using different criteria, or you haven't been persistent enough, or Sam. I mean, Sam is. Sam, playing it well here.
He's work persistent.
Okay. And Jonathan's been both on and off work study in different times. I don't know if you have any advice for the others on that.
I haven't been on work study.
Yeah.
But you did a
At one
grant.
point, weren't you? Yeah, never. Okay, no, I'm
I mean, over the summer we had it wasn't work study, but it was.
Okay, now I'm thinking of Mary. I mean, Mary has been on and then off and then on and off for different times. Okay. Okay. Ian, anything we could talk about that would help you move ahead?
Maybe. Yeah, I think several things and less a lot of you. I sent some things about the cafe variables, but I think of more interest here. I have two things I can talk about. The first thing is more like a general idea going forward, potentially, with the hashtag thing that we emailed about with Ben and the van life, hashtag van life thing I found on the New Yorker article. And so I was thinking about hashtags and scenes and how it would work to use social media for this. And it seems like, I mean, it's one thing to pull user accounts and then like look at what they said, but like figuring out what hashtags would possibly correspond to a certain scene seems like not obvious, I guess, because people who are bohemian aren't gonna do a hashtag bohemian after their thing. Like, I mean, that's like kind of, you know, that's just not what happens. And as the article said, it's, I mean, people who are using hashtag van life are acting in these bohemian ways, and so that's kind of interesting. So I thought maybe I should try to pursue this more and try to find these different, you know, qualitative case study things and different articles and journals that maybe talk about these specific hashtags, and then we can try to construct some kind of thing to use. Because if we're just extracting hashtags, we need to know what to extract, and there needs to be some reason to extract them. And once again, like hashtag Bohemia isn't going to get us Bohemian people, but hashtag van life might.
I mean, like from my data set, looking at it, people who use hashtags more. So like there aren't as many. Like I bet if I ran like median. So
Sorry, what proportion?
I bet the median would be 0.
Median would be 0, really?
Yeah.
It's less.
Or I mean, no, maybe not. Well,
But
or the
very
mean,
low.
The mean, yeah, extremely low. Because like most of them, there's none. So like I don't know if there's enough. I think keyword analysis would probably give better information than hashtag. I just think that most of the information we can put in a tweet is not in the hashtag.
Would you be able to do Instagram or something like that?
And you're also looking at elected officials, right? Like the kind of pattern that, you know, a team uses. Or
Yeah, could be totally different.
For someone our age.
So, but we'd have to like test it and see whether it's effective or not.
Right.
Like, all I'm saying. And we could. I think I haven't checked. I haven't looked at the API yet. Let me do that. I can do that now.
Ian, who are the senders who you have in mind? Are they band members, or are they citizens, or who?
The people who are using the social media? Is it
Who's using the hashtag?
anyone who's on social media? I mean, I think the majority of people.
But you're thinking of analyzing data for average citizens.
Yeah,
and
yeah, right.
comparing, say, different towns in Texas.
Or comparing different. I mean, the idea I was thinking of is the fact that if people are using social media in particular ways that could be reflective of particular kinds of scenes or.
Okay, well, let me stop a second. Is this related to the marching bands, or is this totally separate?
No, this is separate. This is the thing I
Okay.
emailed about with you and Ben, or you said
Yeah,
in the
I remember it.
the New Yorker article about the van life thing and the guys who drove around in a van and they okay, so
I've totally forgotten.
okay, yeah, I'll give a quick rundown. So there's a New Yorker article that I saw, and they followed around these two people who are on Instagram and they're Insta famous, and they do take pictures and like they try to make their money like sponsoring products or whatever, but they live out of a van and they live this kind of bohemian lifestyle, and it's this whole kind of like thing that's documented essentially online under hashtag van life, and it's all these people living out of vans doing these things. And so like there could be something interesting in I mean I don't know, it's just a big germ of an idea, but like I mean looking at how that interacts with something or how that looks and how location wise where that is across the country, because I mean they go to particular locations and particular places, they live out of their vans.
No, but the critical thing that's well, there's several problems, but I mean, a key problem is to join the social media, the social discussions with place. And Ben found a brilliant solution, which was to start with the names of the council members in a city government, and then to look at all of their tweets. See, that joins the geography with the social media. And so how to do that is a big problem that we've struggled with for years, and so we've done things like go go to amenities like Yelp listings for an individual church or a restaurant, which is geographically specific. But that doesn't get you the average citizens more generally. So you're sort of, so if there's a way, so what I'm saying, there's not necessarily one way to do it, but we need to articulate that piece, or we're not gonna have geography included at all.
I mean, and I don't know how it would work downloading things, but I mean, can you get like the tags and the location tags in the post when you download them?
No,
You can from Facebook.
No, but they're two separate things. One is location, second is the tag. And you can have a tag which just says van. You can be anywhere in the world.
Right, but if they are in the same, so if you can download the post and the post would have, yeah, the geolocation and then their hashtag, whatever, so you
What
can
if
see.
it's like 80% or like there? I think like some tweets have locations, right? And some tweets have broader locations, and there are programs that like figure out where the location is based on like, you know, if you tweet like, oh, like went to blah blah restaurant and had this, and like they can find the restaurant. And I think there's like I think I saw a study that said like they can find somewhere between like 50 and 80% of tweets like location wise. But it's not through like a
That,
mixture,
but that,
but it's
but
not.
that number is critical, and the question is how to find it. And it may be that if you spend 10 hours, you can find it for one tweet, but we need something we can do,
Yeah,
for
no.
millions of people.
It would be
quickly and easily.
like it would be
Automatic.
programs that do it, and I don't know enough about.
Okay, no,
Twitter,
but
it does exist.
No, but that, no, be careful. That's what we need. That is,
Right.
we can't just say programs may do this. I mean, that's.
Well, yeah, I mean that would be it'd be worth looking
And
into.
it's not just the program. The question is, what's the methodology that the program uses, and are we comfortable with it? And that is 99% of the research, 90% of the research we've seen in the last 5 years has not done this. And so that's why I'm hitting us on the point that we need to almost start with that. And Ben didn't even realize it was a big issue, but he instinctively solved it in a brilliant way that we're still building on. So, quick follow up on that, Ben. That is a pending issue for the summer. Remember, checking with outside sources that can give us big lists of names, like all the council members and mayors in the country.
Yeah.
Where are we on progress there? You were going to write to the National League of Cities or contact them.
I don't know.
That's what we need. Okay. So Ian, Jonathan, Ben, you're all sort of overlapping here. Your idea, is there any way to, the other theme which you've worked on is the idea of marching bands. That is, he's conducted Beethoven and he's conducted marching bands. He's been in Texas, so he knows small town Texas stuff as well as, high culture European stuff. And joining the two and thinking about those, where we have an interpenetration of those in different locations and neighborhoods is a great idea. Ian is very thoughtful. He theorizes this way. So if we get a little bit of good grist, I love working with Ian, and we just haven't talked and done this for a while. So I'm thinking out loud. How can we take the idea of either of them? Someone else have thoughts?
One thing that I sent you, I made the Excel sheet. I made an Excel sheet of all of the marching bands that have appeared as finalists at, I think, the biggest marching band competition in the country. It's held every year. There's about 12 finalists every year, and so I compiled an Excel sheet of them. There are 36 unique bands that are part of it.
Okay, stop. What some of the others guys have, but what you don't, is you can't do anything with 36 cases. We need maybe 36,000 or 3,600 before we can. Do we have everybody who applied, for instance? Do we have a sense? Do we have a listing that where we could get, where are there any marching bands? And if we had a list of all the high schools in the country, how many of them have marching bands? That's the kind of thing that would be more useful.
Okay.
And so if the pinnacle is it's great to know the pen, but knowing the names of 36 is a case study. It's not quantitative analysis.
Right. Okay.
Or what is it a part of? It's something else. If we think of this small, medium-sized, but small town, where the high school, the football game, the basketball games, the baseball games, the marching bands, these are big, big stuff in a small town. How to capture that with anything else besides, maybe the marching band is too esoteric. Is there anything else you think of that would be on, that would list those somewhere that you would, I mean, if you live in a small town, what do you look for? You look in the local, in the old days, it'd be the local newspapers or something on some media that would list these.
Yeah, I mean,
That would differentiate between, or, for instance, I've talked to people in Chicago, and I've said, you want to live in Bronzeville? And I've talked to African Americans, sort of middle class African Americans, and say, would you want to live in Bronzeville? And say, no, they don't have a good they don't have a good little league facility. They don't have a good, a baseball area for little league in that neighborhood. I'd never heard of people talk about that before, but this is on the mind of someone, and that might be quantifiable that we could see in the type of playground, the type of
I think that there could be, I think we've touched on this before, there could be something with the football thing. I mean, there may be something more comprehensive lists of football things in some way, because that is such a big deal. If there be, I don't know.
How about just exploring a little bit, say, sports? I mean, how are different sports listed on the internet, and especially high school sports, and are there ways that we could somehow build on that? That is, maybe we're all thinking that they're identical, but I'm not sure they're identical. I mean, that is when I heard that story. Bronzeville doesn't have a little league. That I said, oh my God! I lived here all these years and I didn't know that. Okay, but so maybe there's something which could. I don't know. Or maybe we struggled with this when we started the Scenes Project. I mean, we had things, we were getting prices of tickets. We were getting we were getting competition results between athletic teams in states. We were getting this for Broadway shows, for theatrical performances. And we spent about 2 years trying to get quality, high to low rankings on the amenities. And after 2 years, we basically gave up. It was so hard, and we had the data was so bad that it was too hard, and each one demanded a lot of subtle knowledge of how it worked. So I'm not saying we should, because we tried and we failed. So in a sense, so that's not to say it's not. Well, let me back up. The other thing you're working on is cafes. Cafes have now become massive, but seeing within Chicago, some neighborhoods like Woodlawn saying we really want to, or South Shore, it's really South Shore, we want a Starbucks. Starbucks company said no. We checked the numbers. You don't make the grade. So they got a foundation to buy them a Starbucks, to subsidize their Starbucks. So where and why you have different cafes is what Mary has put into the regressions. We've got the regression results. You can help us interpret those more subtly, maybe by finding a little more information about the cafes that's on something on the internet, or maybe even on social media. I don't know. That is, if there'd be one big thing that sounds simple, but a big thing which I haven't seen literature on is how much do people work or do other things in cafes? It's Ben's question. What's the agenda of the council members? And what same thing applied to people in cafes, with a simple idea that at least the Roman Parisian ideal is that you talk to people in the cafe and you look in the street. The American Northern European Protestant is you sit there with your own little computer and you work in the cafe. And so some of the Southern Europeans are attacking that, but that Northern European ideal is now infusing not only the cafes in France have dropped by half in the last 5 years, as they become more Northern Europeanized, and the French restaurants are complaining that people are just sitting here and working through lunch. They're not having a 2-hour, 2 wine, 3 dessert kind of meal, and it's disaster for classic French cuisine. Okay, so these are fighting words about cultural perspectives, and if we can get that captured in Facebook, Twitter, of the Northern European hard work, hard lunch, hard cafe, or don't even go to the cafe, or how that is to use something about social. I mean, there must be tons of stuff about cafes on social media if we could, get
Yeah, we could do that.
get something there, and then I'm sure variations within the U.S.
Yeah. And I have quotes of our Facebook. Yeah. So I ran a test for that when the Korean group came. And I spoke with one of the members from
Anything on the categories and the results, for instance, that would feed into this? So for instance, work versus play, or more sociable versus more individual, or something. What are the categories that would might capture? What'd you do with the Korean group?
Nothing. She was having difficulty setting up the Facebook actual ability to download information. She didn't think it was possible, and so I just wanted to just to be helpful. I just tried it for her to set it up, and I'm good to set it up. And also, in case we wanted.
No, but that's interesting for the rest of us. Just tell us briefly, how many Facebook entries could you or did?
I was able to download all of Barack Obama's Facebook posts going back to 2011, maybe.
Okay, so you choose a name like Barack Obama.
Yeah,
And
like a
you
Facebook
download.
account.
Okay.
Okay.
What if you want all the people in different kinds of cafes in, say, in Dubuque versus?
I think it depends on who you're friends with, and public pages you can download stuff from, but I guess in private accounts, if they wanted to download mine, they wouldn't have access to it. So you can't.
But can anybody, the way you did for Twitter, now download that? I
Yes.
had the impression you could not do that for
Yes, you
Facebook.
can do it for Facebook.
So now you can, but it's the public pages.
Yeah.
Does that I'm just naive. Is this, what does that include, going to a cafe, or does it say what I did, or it only has sort of a one page?
It basically looks just like the tweets. There's different kinds of information. It looks like there's more kinds of information you can pull, and we'd have to have a more organized approach. Because Facebook, unlike Twitter, is not just a feed; it's also got other kinds of things. So there are images. There are other kinds of things that were metadata.
But you're saying that unless the Facebook user labels it private, you could download everything they said they did in that day.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, that's dynamite, man. That's a change from a few years ago.
And the keyword tools that I'm using right now, I already can set up to analyze that.
Okay, now that's dynamite.
And I looked at the numbers. Only 17% of the U.S. population uses Twitter, whereas there's 79% that use Facebook. So in terms of the applicability, the network that's using Twitter, from a politician standpoint, it might make sense to study Twitter, but from an everyday citizen standpoint, the Facebook approach is a much better
Okay.
option.
Could we then get a sample of either the U.S. population, or start with, say, northern and southern Illinois, or?
I can see if it's possible just to sort of pick places by location and sample that.
Or if somebody has done this and knows that we
we can
can
look
get
at that
access to
too.
them, all the better.
Aren't Facebook accounts when you make it? Aren't the default is private now?
Yeah,
What-
probably. I don't.
I wonder what percent that aren't either public officials or organizations either the cafe itself or public groups. I honestly would doubt there'd be a significant
I would
percentage of
and not only that, but it could be skewed because
Right.
people
just like normal everyday people having.
No, I
Facebook
mean, I have,
accounts, like,
no one has a reason to do it particularly,
Yeah.
you know, if you go out and drink with your buddies, you don't want them.
And I think you have to specifically change it to public
Yeah.
instead of the other way around. So like,
But just, if we could somehow get a little bit of data, I mean, what percentage are public, what would be nice? And if it's, you know, 1%, then it's out. I mean, if it's, but Facebook is so big that if it's even just say 5%, if 5% of all of Facebook postings are public, that's a massive data file, which would be, for average citizens, then you could compare the average citizens to the leaders.
Yeah. And even in cases where when I called some of the politicians' offices to ask why they didn't have Twitter accounts, they would say, well, we don't have a Twitter account, but we have a Facebook page. And so,
No, okay, but that's,
So-
and why then did you choose Twitter?
because Trump is using Twitter and because I wanted to see how other politicians were reacting to Trump's behavior and see how Twitter usage changed over time, given that. But I also, at the time, just, you know, I mean, for example, Barack Obama's feed at the Facebook feed looks like it's less populated, so I'm not necessarily convinced that politicians are using it for marketing, but more for reaching out to local level people for these events. So Facebook may be a better way to actually try to, for example, you can set up events on Facebook, which you can't do on Twitter. So if you're trying to organize, let's say, something in a cafe, it would be a lot easier to use Facebook than Twitter to do it. So
Okay, now this is a very important conversation so that implies in terms of our strategy, maybe we should look at either at both or, you know, or at
Both
least.
or shift some to Facebook.
You know, get a little more information in
Yeah.
terms of can we really use it or.
And for the scenes, I think Facebook will be a much better tool for scenes in terms of social media because the Twitter seems to be primarily like just sort of sharing links more. I mean, it's used for opinions too, but it doesn't have quite the sort of local level interaction that I think Facebook brings to it. I mean, students use Facebook all the time to coordinate events just for random parties on campus. So I think it's a much more locally driven kind of.
Okay, no, well, if you could try to maybe give us an update in terms of strategy and then, but in terms of say an email or contact with other officials like the National League of Cities to ask for mayors and council members.
Yeah.
And or are there any other organizations that might have members that would be a strategy for us to sample
Yeah.
to get local links to see that's what we desperately need. How do we add the local hooks to these stuff floating around in the clouds?
Yeah, my plan was not to just ask for Twitter anymore, but was also to ask for Facebook and see. I don't think Instagram has the same wide usage at all. No, I think it's a much more. It's just pictures, so it doesn't have the connectivity factor. I think it's a different environment.
Okay. Great.
So I can do that after Monday, after I finish my first draft on the presentation. I can then, before our next meeting, try to prepare some information on the Facebook.
Good, okay. All right, shall we, Ian, you've got to start at anything that we might want, so we, in a sense, one quick bottom line is the search word sports, I guess. Sports, small town sports, anything more general, the second was cafes, yeah, to look for anything on cafes that we could add to what you've done and what Mary has done on the cafes. And any other dimensions that anybody might have researched on those would be great. Like keywords, that would feed into keywords, and then the ones I've just given you are sort of social context and individual work. Okay, those in turn might feed into Trump scenes in the sense of, you know, how where and how are the styles of different, that is, we've got Elazar's 3 types, for instance. How much are the Elazar 3 types, in a sense, we could say we're trying to do something like the Trump 7 types or whatever. And how could we identify Trump scene? The one piece leading in this direction, I heard at NPR, I heard a smart economist, a name like he had 3 names, so like John, Goldenweiser, Schmo, whatever. he's an economist who writes op-ed for the New York Times. Yeah, so Sam may be able to find him in 30 seconds. But he has a new book called something like Big Data, Big, you know, so it was an interview about his new book. And it included the speeches that Obama had given on diversity. And so Obama was lamenting the fact and saying we need to have more tolerance for diversity. We shouldn't be attacking Muslims. We should be, but the point was it was done in a fairly abstract way. Okay, so this guy then did a Google search on kill Muslims. And he found that the interesting thing he found, it was not the South, or that is, it wasn't simple north-south. He found rural areas like rural Wisconsin, rural Pennsylvania, small towns in Michigan tended to have more people who were searching on kill Muslims and finding then the radical groups who were killing, or at least emailing about this stuff. So he's got things, and that's an extreme version. But he's identified, in a sense, some extreme aspects. You finding the book?
Is the author? Do you know the name of the author? Is the only thing I can find in New York Times column is Thomas Friedman?
No.
I'm assuming that's not.
Three names. The second name is sort of a German Jewish name. I'd say like Rosenzweig, so something like that. But he was on NPR in the last 10 days on his book, and big data was one of the words in the title of the book.
Is it Victor Meyer Schroeder?
Yeah. Say that again.
Victor Meyer Schroeder.
What?
Schronberger.
That's
Yeah,
not
Schonberger.
His book is called Big Data. Maybe
read the subtitle.
a revolution that will transform how we live, work, and think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think does it say he's the New York Times up there, right?
I'll check. It might be him, maybe not.
That sounds pretty close. But the point was, I immediately as I listened to it, I said, can we get some Trump scene measures from this big data stuff which he's doing? And it was basically Google searches, but he had other things. But it's a book filled with juicy, interesting results. At least that's the way he presented it. Quickly presented, as a New York Times op-ed writer should. But he's got lots of background work which feeds into it. So my suggestion is maybe probably one of you Trump folks glance through and see if there's something that might. But what I'm searching for that is to join the cases with the idea we've talked about a little bit loosely of the Trump scenes, plural. That is, how do we go from Dubuque? That is Dubuque a type of a Trump scene that we want to play up? And maybe this is leading to Jonathan and Amanda. Are there other dimensions of our scenes that link to the propositions that we could? And so when you talked about, say, having quadrants, so we could talk about the dimensions of religiosity or unemployment or change in income or change in unemployment as bigger dimensions. And then we could say, okay, a Trump scene is high unemployment and increase in unemployment in the last 5 years, and low income and low education. That's one Trump scene. So we could arbitrarily do that, but I guess for regression type stuff, we don't want to throw out all. We want to ideally keep all the cases. So instead of saying, we can have 5 of these, and here's an extreme. It's better if we can say, here are the 5 dimensions we want to look at, and this is the core of the propositions in the paper. But if we could also say, here are some cases that are very high on these. So I think I'm almost reinventing what you've done, but I'm sort of I'd love to listen maybe to Jonathan Amanda or any of the others.
Oh, here's
I
something.
want to talk a little bit, and this is what you had in the scatter plot that you guys, Sam, I guess, showed us two or so weeks ago.
Something interesting you might be interested in.
Go ahead.
The guy publishes his data online, and I think he does like a county by county breakdown of the racially charged searches.
Fantastic.
He publishes a lot, but I'll look into that.
Okay, so that is, if there's an easy way to bring it in, and we don't wanna, that is, we've got, or so, let me back up. Maybe we should start with where we were an hour ago. What are your summer plans? That is, what's our timetable? What can we do realistically, and how should we organize our tasks to do what, when? Is this, so, how many of you can work at least part-time on this through a good chunk of the summer?
I'm not sure my official hours yet. It's like very much.
And you know, where you are doesn't matter. I mean, you can work on this in Barcelona or California or whatever. And if you have a full-time job, you can still, I mean, if you're willing and interested, great. And if there's a way we could somehow maybe work something out better financially, if that's an issue as well, that's a possible option, is what I'm trying to say as well. But I mean, so Sam has applied, and you'll be in Chicago.
Yes.
Okay, so that's clear. Why don't we just go around the room for the rest of you? Kelvin, what
I'm
do
gonna be in Minneapolis. I'm starting my full-time job at the end of June. I could put in some hours this, but it's gonna be diminished, obviously.
Okay, fair enough. Jake,
I'm working full time in DC, but I'd be willing to put in like part time or something.
Okay, terrific. Yeah, have you applied or thought of applying, applied for work study? 'Cause-
I'll definitely look into it. Yeah, I hadn't even
Great.
thought of it before, but.
Okay. Jonathan?
I'll be traveling for most of the summer, but I won't have a laptop with me, so I won't be able to really do much of any data stuff, so I won't have any data programs
So you do
on me.
anything with a little?
I mean, I can do Google searches.
Yeah, or, I mean, what?
I can help, but I
Not-
can't do much of what I have been doing.
I mean, the other people, the thing that people do who are traveling a lot is, you go into a cafe or whatever, and then just use a computer and access stuff online.
You know, I mean, I can do that kind of work, but even something like that, they wouldn't have, Stata, that kind of stuff. I wouldn't have access to.
But you have access to Stata through the USC network. Just call into the USC network from anywhere with your
You
ID.
need to be on the use.
and
You
can
need to be
run
on
Stata.
use Chicago Wi-Fi to access the virtual lab.
No,
I think that's true.
No,
It is.
I mean,
Pretty sure virtual lab requires.
access it from home. That is, well, you
You can
may-
get a Chicago VPN hypothetically
Yeah,
if you
I
wanted
did
to.
VPN when I did the Stata class last year.
And the other thing is put data on, say, on Dropbox or, a Google site, then you can download those data, run it on the Stata program from a cafe in Vermont or wherever.
I mean, if I could get access to Stata somehow, whether it's through VR Lab, I could do that, but I'm not sure how.
I mean, I call in from home, I mean, so yes, I mean, that should not be an issue. I mean, if you're comfortable using Stata over the network, it's easy. That is, I'm still not very good at using that network.
What do you mean using the network?
You've got to enter your data, save the data.
Oh, yeah, I've done that. I've had to do it.
Okay, and so if you know how to do that, then
I've done that part.
that's the harder part, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's great. Anything you want to mention to us about your travels? I mean, are you traveling in a van, or are there you have private things you don't want to talk about?
I mean, I'm planning on landing in Brussels and then kind of randomly going places for 2 months.
Okay,
That's kind of
Brussels
that's
and
the extent
random-
of my plans.
Brussels and random places around Europe are filled with
Yeah.
cafes and cyber cafes and
Yeah.
so
No,
forth.
I won't be in like a unconnected part of the world.
Okay.
I just won't have my stuff.
Okay. No, but if you do a little preparation in advance, you put the files you need, say on Dropbox, then I've done a fair amount of that, so I can do it here, so that I can use this little this thing is now so powerful that you can access all your Dropbox files, all of tons of stuff. So then is to get just and if the program will run, I mean, Stata or R, SPSS, Excel, are all on the network at the university. I'm just telling you this for the rest of you, if it wasn't clear to you, that You can do this in Washington or anywhere else, even if you don't have these programs in your machine. Okay, well, great to have some European travel. Amanda?
Yeah, I'll be in New York this summer, probably just studying for the GRE, so I should be able to do part-time.
Fantastic. Okay, now wait, you haven't talked that much, but I know you're there, and you've sometimes done some critical stuff, and we would love to have you, even ask, is there anything that any of you, let's finish with Eric, then let me go back and ask all of you, is there any way that we can work with you more productively, that we can, that you would, if you have a gripe, a comment, a suggestion for improvement, or how we're working together, and how we could make things easier if you're in New York or Brussels or Minneapolis. So let's come back on that, but Amanda and Eric?
So I'll be working downtown, for the summer full-time. I'm starting like a full-time position there after graduation, so I'm not sure what the official
Are you graduating now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure what the timeline is yet. They say there's a lot of overtime, but I can work part-time as much as I can. So
Okay. Yeah, the rest of you are not seniors, are you? No.
I'm graduating here.
Just these two
So
aren't
you-
graduating. The rest of us all, 4 of the 6 people who graduated.
Okay, so Kelton and Eric are graduating.
And Amanda and Johnny.
Yeah.
Oh, man, are you graduating?
Yeah, all
Yeah.
4 of us.
Just as Jacob.
Just
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What's your job, Eric?
I'm gonna be a paralegal at Kirkland and Ellis downtown.
That covers a huge range of possibilities. Okay.
They're clapping for you, Eric.
Why don't we join maybe the two themes then? Timing, what's realistic, and are there any ways we could work together more realistically? And then maybe third, what products should we each either collectively or maybe breaking it up in a smaller chunk or chunks?
For this coming week?
Think about, well, what should we do?
So, I think we should probably finish up the case studies in regards to like finding for instance the mayoral quotes, for instance, for each of the towns we want to do, focus in on 6 to 8 of them, incorporate them into our long paper and incorporate them into the op-ed, which I think are 2 distinctly different things. We have to explain them in different contexts and format them very differently. I think that's probably the most important stuff we need to do right now. I know that doesn't sound like a ton. I would like to probably move past that. I think more than that, on the long paper, it hasn't changed that much since the MPSA. We probably need to do some formatting because we technically made an appendix section. We aren't really using it right now at all. We have like the graphs still in the middle and they're like and that sort of stuff. So we could probably have a little bit more organized formatting in that regard, and perhaps like a literature review section, just a brief one. I don't think we need to go over very much, just kind of discuss previous stuff on the topic and how our do you think that's necessary or no? Because we technically still have it written there, but we haven't used it.
We need a bit, because that is, there's gonna be an explosion in the next 6 months, 2 years and so forth on this topic. And so
Sure.
if we could at least just show, what we've done to look for more serious political science work as well as the more journalistic and then mention, what the state of that literature and how we've looked at it. Yes.
Okay.
That is, we make a strong claim in the op-ed and the longer version that nobody's doing this. I mean, how do we know? Okay. Or that is, the main point is most people have done case studies.
Right.
And that's fine. I mean, but we want to say that, and then with a little bit of a literature, and then say, look, I mean, most of the literature is the journalistic coverage. And that's what Eric?
One thing we can work on is maybe condensing the paper. It's long and a little bit repetitive, so we can try to tighten up the language, because a lot of the hypotheses are kind of repeated when we're talking about data.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Now I'd say that sounds. I mean, in terms of products, probably the longer version plus the adding the case studies. Maybe second, an op-ed that comes from that, but I mean, we're talking about one op-ed. On the other hand, there are multiple places we could potentially go with different, and it could be 3 pages, or it could be a different kind of theme. That is, we could do 2 or 3 themes in that could go to different social media or whatever else.
Sure.
In addition to a normal newspaper, which would have an op-ed kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the third thing is what Eric is getting at. That is, this is more, say, a political science journal article. We ought to do a political science type journal article from this. And the easiest is probably just to edit down the long version and just make it tighter, shorter, more focused. And the easiest way to write 25 pages is to write 70 pages and then
And then
think
cut
about
down,
it,
yeah.
size, and then boil it down. And so that's fine. That's fine. And we've got 70 excellent pages, but certainly we could or maybe think of 2 papers, or 2 or 3 papers somehow that might go in one or another direction. So if we've got, say, Sam is continuing, only Sam, I guess, is really continuing here regularly over the summer. Jake, you're
Washington D.C.
You're in Washington, so you got one, John. Yeah, Amanda, are you looking for work, or you're staying? Or no, you see, you're working on GRE. So you're thinking of going to graduate school.
I am looking for jobs right now, but yeah, I'm taking the summer to study for the GRE.
But are you going to take off a year and not apply to grad school, or are you trying to go right to graduate school?
No, I'm trying to work for probably 2 years and then go to grad
2 years.
school.
Okay,
Yeah,
so you-
similar to what Johnny's doing, I think, right? Yeah.
When I get back, yeah.
Are you graduating?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is, I'm
Okay.
traveling and I'm gonna be living in New York or DC. We're trying to desperately find a job.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, so we had that conversation before, looking for various kinds of jobs. Okay. So I mean, but that is, I mean, given that, I mean, it's fine not to rush and take a medium pay job. I mean, that is, put differently, there are lots and lots of jobs looking for you right now. That is, the unemployment rate is minimal. There are lots of employers. You ought to be able to find a job that is challenging and interesting if you take a little bit longer, I guess is what I'm saying. And if you do that, or even maybe you could start out on a trial basis with one. If it doesn't work out, then you can change. That is in conjunction with, and we work with many people in a similar situation. It's fine for us, we can work with you, and then if you don't work at all because you're busy for 2 weeks or whatever, but then come back, you got a long 4-day weekend, then you can almost write a whole paper in 4. I mean, that is, we now have shared with you, with most of you, enough expertise, and you all are so good at presenting together and jointly that many of you could almost, sit down and write a 20-page paper over a long weekend, and that's great. So maybe thinking of that, and that is, and how is that possible? By taking the same 75-page draft and then saying, okay, this is a good idea, but how can we elaborate that? And just taking 10 pages, cutting it, pasting, elaborating, and focusing on, say, religion, or on unemployment, or on those things, or on the statistical modeling, or on, that is, there's enough rich stuff there that there are several good journal articles potentially there, and there are probably 5 to 10 more in what Dan and I did, but we simply have not taken the time to focus them and write. And I say that especially saying, I haven't seen all of you writing individually. Yeah, so your BA, I'm gonna see what you've done. What have I seen about you in writing?
Parts of the
Jacob's written a lot of the long paper in the.
But I haven't seen something that is. Jonathan, I know, right? I mean, that is. I haven't seen so much from Armando. But that is, most of you. The point I'm making is you speak clearly, you write clearly, you write well, you present very well. So these are not things I'm just throwing out in the air. These are realistic things that you could be doing when you're in Brussels on a train and it's getting boring on the train. Just get out your little accuracy. Your ideas for a paper that I might and get a rough draft and just work on it. And when you go to Europe, you're gonna find people like Trump being discussed, especially in Belgium. Okay. In France, okay. These are big European issues as they are here. Brexit, people are, Brexit, the English, people are gonna be fighting the English, etc. All right. What else should we do now to move in this direction that would be helpful? Any tentative ideas?
In regards to what, for next week's meeting or just in general?
Yeah, both. Maybe first leading to the second. Is there, or put it differently, is there, especially I'd say maybe for Eric and Amanda, from whom I haven't heard something specific, and maybe Jonathan in the last couple of weeks, is there some other reaction you have to these? That is, I've been talking a lot, and I haven't been listening enough as much as I would like to and so I'm turning in part to you two or three, because I've talked more, I guess, with these guys. I think, but maybe what you've said has been private and/or is folded into what has been more generally written collectively. But any either ideas, a theme, a piece of 70 pages, or a way of implementing better than we've talked thus far, our aspirations to have interesting stuff about Trump.
I think at least right now, I think the priority would be to just condense the paper, because we have a lot of stuff, and to make it more presentable, especially with the incorporation of case studies, because especially if you're trying to add that, we're gonna have this massive document without, I don't think is, to me, both should definitely try to condense that to something presentable, maybe like a 20-page type of document. I think it's like at least definitely should be. I'll probably be working on that before graduating, just to make sure that something like that is.
And if one of you, for instance, if or someone somehow wanted to do this into an MA, into a shortish book, we could try to do that as well. But it's going to take someone who wants to, commit to that in a more active way. So anyway, whatever.
In terms of condensing, also from a data standpoint, I think we have two hypotheses on religion. I know it's a little late in the game, but I think we might be better off if we just condense them into a single hypothesis. They're not that different from each other, and we talked about the paper being a little bit redundant, and I think the two religion hypotheses are kind of redundant. So
what are the two religion hypotheses?
The two scenes. The first one is change in religiosity, diversity, and I guess rural scenes, and then the other one is religiosity, rural scenes, and neighborliness. And I might be missing more of the subtleties. Sam, you wrote those originally, right?
Yeah.
And
I think they could probably be.
I think we
we
might
can condense it. I think it would make the papers less repetitive.
Yeah. Because the results are much the same. The only different variables are neighborliness in one, and diversity in the other. So I think we could potentially make the two into one hypothesis.
We could probably do the same, to be honest, for the fourth and fifth hypotheses as well, because they're both basically racial resentment as a result of economic downturns. But that's slightly different, because one's talking about immigration, and one's just talking about general diversity.
Thank you.
I haven't gotten to that level of close editing yet, as you have seen. So I'll leave it to you folks to think about it. But those sound like good suggestions, and maybe you could call it 7A and 7B or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's a good idea.
Other thoughts, Amanda, more general beyond that, in terms of we haven't heard specifically from the two of you about choosing cases or strategies for
I mean, so I can talk about what we did this week.
Okay.
So I remember when we had talked last week, I believe it was, we were talking about about trying to use the regression outputs, specifically the residuals, to try to pick out cases in a way that's not just looking at a scatter plot, but is actually using the regression output. And so what we were doing is, and I think the way we kind of were approaching this with Sam and Jacob were that there's kind of two different types of case studies that are interesting to us in a very broad sense. There's the ones that look very nice according to our models, you know, that have that are high on all the points we want them to be and that fit in our regression really well. And those are much harder to find in the residuals because for the most part most residuals are at least moderately small because that's the point of the regression, right? But the second type are the cases that maybe don't immediately fit with the scene, and then going from those and looking at, okay, well, this didn't fit with this model, and then saying, well, the reason why, or looking more deeply into it, we can say, okay, well, it has this other dimension that wasn't included in the model, and so it adds to kind of the broader sense of the study, right, which is that there's all these different Trump scenes, and that you can't just have one or two variables, and so our scenes maybe are better than one or two variables, but there's still all this extra complexity that you see when you look at these residual outputs, right? You see these ones that are in weird places that, you know, have something odd going on that's worth looking at beyond just them not fitting with the model. And so we were picking out the cases that were particularly surprising according to our model because they had, I think the residuals were greater than 4, which is pretty high. So that's what we did. We picked out all the residuals that had cases higher than 4 for all the different, for all 7 of the
No,
propositions.
all the cases that were what, higher?
So all zip codes that had residuals higher than 4 or negative 4.
Residuals higher than
4 or negative 4.
4, sort of a standard score of 4?
So we picked 4 because it was the one that had relatively clearly defined case studies outside.
No, sorry,
Often-
what, is 4 a numeric, is proposition 4 you mean?
No, 4
No.
4 is a value of like the value, like the residual number. So like the difference between what, right? The residual is just the difference between the predicted value and the actual value. And so if that value is greater than 4, we picked it as a potential case study.
But are these so-called standard scores? So
They're
the
standardized.
Well,
Yeah, they're
one is
standardized.
one standard
Yeah,
deviation.
and so I know it's usually 2 is often kind of what's often accepted as kind of limits for outliers, but there were thousands
We would have
outside of 2,
thousands, yeah.
and so we thought that we wanted more extreme outliers than that.
But these are more or less that is the term standard scores is normally means a value of 1, or say a value of 2 means it's 2 standard deviations above the mean, and the mean is 0.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Okay.
So we picked ones that were 4.
4 standard deviations.
Because it
above.
gave us,
Yeah, that's fine.
between 5 and 15 cases for
Great,
each
great,
of the,
great.
for each of the different propositions. Then I believe Sam picked out, how many did you do, 6 of them?
I did 6 or 7 so far, a couple from years ago. I gave those.
Yeah, actually, let me ask maybe a wild question. Is all the empirical analysis you've been doing with the zip codes, have you done any analysis with the, I guess we started last time briefly, with the individual data which Mary has been using?
No.
So that's what you started with the time budget data, I guess.
Sorry, say that again.
Or who was it? Was that Kelton? Or no, it was Jacob, wasn't it?
Time budget.
You started with what's called APC, the.
Oh yeah, the American Community Survey.
American
I talked to
Community
Mary a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's all been
Okay,
zip codes so far.
but in the last months, we've never analyzed any individual data, is what you're saying, I think. Is that right?
What do
Yeah.
you mean by individual data?
Sorry?
What do you mean by individual data?
One person says, my view is, I voted this way for that reason.
We-
In contrast to having a zip
Is
code.
that good, right?
We haven't used any of that.
The CPS is not part of the data set we've been using,
Okay.
mostly because at this
So
point.
so that's another frontier we could explore when and if we have time, and or you
Yeah,
find someone
absolutely.
who knows it like Mary. Okay. So sorry, I interrupted
So
you.
yeah, so we picked out those cases that we thought would be potentially interesting case studies. We got about 5 to 15 for each proposition. We listed them along with some descriptive statistics about those possible case studies. And
When you
Sam
say
was working-
proposition, you mean variable or the proposition
So,
including all of
so
variables?
each proposition, right, has at the end of the day one regression output, right? So each one has a slightly.
I see, so you have a
right.
model, basically, a
Yeah, so
proposition leads to a
sorry,
model.
I'm thinking of those.
Then you take the
right.
residual from the model.
So we
Okay.
have 8 different models from the 8 different propositions, and we have residuals from 8 of those models, or from those 8 models.
Okay, great.
And so Sam has been starting to look
Yeah.
at those for ones that are potentially interesting. I don't know which, I actually didn't see the ones you picked out. I
The
didn't look-
best
I know you sent
example
them.
of stuff that I got from your data set was on our 5th hypothesis, I think it was Amarillo, Texas. I think it's what you called. And it lined up very well, it worked pretty well. Your guys' way of structuring it with like highlighting the ones that were kind of outliers or extremes made it very easy to go through. Yeah.
I mean, let me stop you for a minute to just, I mean, I hear that, it's doable, it makes it semi-make sense. What worries me, but I don't have an answer to this criticism, is how do we link that to the findings which were I'd say probably some of the most interesting findings in writing and in the presentation were the cases or the relationships that reverse when we look at the interaction terms.
Yeah.
And that's what we 4 of you tried, and we all basically failed, I think.
Yeah.
And I turn to you because I don't know I don't have a good answer.
Right, I mean, I guess the only thing
That is, maybe what we should do if we're still, unless anybody has more hints, maybe we should take this to a statistician type and ask them for advice. I mean, there's one guy I just talked to this week about a list of, is Ross Stolzenberg. He teaches a course called Intermediary Regression. He was editor for 15 years or so of a journal called Sociological Methodology. So I mean, he knows. He's an applied statistician.
Are we trying to find a method that's not just kind of picking zip codes? Like, I can think of ways where we can find kind of what you're talking about, but at the end of the day, it's slightly arbitrary in what makes something interesting and what makes it not. Like, it's like, you know, you say, it was like I talked about the quadrants last time, but at the end of the day, you're just picking them out.
No, but I'd say the quadrants idea is a step in the right, is a good field to pursue a little further.
Okay.
But it doesn't tell us more specifically how, I mean, if we had quadrants, we could say, we can choose some cases, but
it's not it's not the regression, it's a correlation.
The interesting finding is the reversal of the relationship, and that in the interaction effect. I can't remember well enough from the paper, but give us an example of.
I don't know what a correct one is off the top of my head.
Or Eric, you wrote that up. You remember one of those things that reverses, or finding that reverses in.
I think it was.
Things like religiosity combined with unemployment, combined with
So, like,
changes in job growth or stuff like that.
Religiosity was one of them.
Yeah.
I think Proposition 7 was the one that was most interesting looking for that reason.
I'll pull it up.
I don't remember
Also,
exactly.
job loss combines with manufacturing and whiteness to produce Trump voting, whereas normally manufacturing white voters normally vote Democrat.
Okay, I mean,
That's like an interaction term.
that's the kind of thing that we ought to pursue somehow, but how is the question? How specifically get at that dynamic? And I don't have a good answer.
Those were some of the cases that like Sam was picking out of both of the communities that we offered. He was trying to find areas that specifically where they looked like they reflected the sort of interactions that we built our paper around. So like Dubuque, normally very white, manufacturing, normally votes very Democrat, but because of recent unemployment, you know, that interaction means voting Trump. Is that the type of thing that you're looking for?
more or less, yes, but we need more than one case. We need to, that is, the potential richness of a case can ideally show us a dynamic of people doing things, processes happening that will help interpret the statistical result,
Right.
which does not. That's what we want.
Maybe we could run,
And more subtle, more careful statistical analysis ought to do this as well.
maybe you could run two, you basically, I know we're not huge fans of splitting up data, but you run two regression outputs of the, without the interaction term, of all the data except the job loss, right, which interacts with it. And the first one would have, you know, job loss greater than some number, the other one would have job loss less than that number. So you could see the interaction on the, you know, in a graph, and then from that we could pick variables that are, you know, that show the greatest difference. So like variables that have the same, I'm trying to think of what, so like if you had Trump voting versus,
And that's called split halves. So you
Right.
could either split halves or partition the data
Right.
into tenths or thirds or something else. And that's exactly what we did with Yasmin, especially. Yasmin's paper at the
Right.
Midwest did this for income and ethnic diversity.
but I don't know how you would go from that. I mean, at the end of the day, you're still just randomly picking cases. Like it doesn't point you to certain cases, right?
Well, but it's a step in this good direction. What if one small subtask we could add even for this week, if one of you could maybe send me maybe the 70 pages again with sort of something which sort of tries to say, let's look at pages, say 62 and 63, and join that with this table, and then try to say, how do we explain the reversal? And how that is, I'm trying to have it in a way I can pass this on to say, you know, a statistical consultant, say, okay, here's our problem. It's gotta be clear, short, I mean, it's no more than about 2 or 3 pages max. And it can be
Okay.
2 or 3 pages from the whole manuscript. So they can see, here's a 70-page manuscript, but we need your help on page 39.
Just like pull some blurbs from, you know, page 39, for example.
Yeah, don't pull, give us the full text.
Okay.
But then maybe say in a half a page, here's the problem we want help on.
Okay.
Cause we're hitting a dead end and we're just not as robust at this stuff as say Stolzenberg or somebody like, Gelman. I mean, Gelman is really, Gelman's book is just so creative on this stuff. And he's continually making scatter plots and just much more than this, but I mean, creative things like this, joining.
What was his name?
Gellman. He's at Columbia. Gelman, and he has a woman he works with called, I think, Smith. And they have a textbook called Intermediary Regression, something like that. But it's I've mentioned it to you, Jonathan, 2 or 3 times. And the thing which I keep quoting you for is he says, for every table you make, create a figure as well.
Gelman and Hill.
What's your name?
Gelman and Jennifer Hill.
Jennifer Hill. What's the book called?
The one I'm looking at right now is called Data Analysis Using Regression and Hierarchical Models. I remember you showed it to me, that one.
That's it, yep.
Yeah.
Read that when you're at your law firm. That is, in the next 20 years, lawyers are gonna be doing this stuff, I predict. Other thoughts for the week? Or more generally, like nagging concerns, that is either shorter term with all of you or medium term that say Sam and I and some of you part-time can struggle with is with sitting on long trains across Europe or in the New York subways.
I mean, one thing it's not like a huge deal, but I think needs to be in the paper more is a kind of more baseline statistical idea of what's going on. Like we talk a lot about these like interaction terms and simple like
Yes,
complicated
yes.
propositions, but like
No,
what
no, but I
percentage
mean-
votes this in a very broad sense needs to
When,
be.
remember the people on the panel in the Midwest, I mean, I had to jump in and say, we're using data for all the US counties. Okay, so 10 pages, a few pages on that would be great. Yeah, so yes, please. So Amanda and John can maybe confer on that and try to
Work on those two
Yeah,
things.
just throw some back, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But if it's, are there any ways of joining that? I mean, if we could do that, say, if we had, say, 6 types of Trump scenes, then if we could have sort of means, standard
Right.
deviations, average income, unemployment for the different Trump scenes, or transgression, or.
When you say for the Trump scenes, do you mean for only for zip codes we think match the scene? Like trying to identify all the zip codes that are like in that scene? Because none of our analysis really does that. Because it's all a spectrum.
Yeah. Well, it's a conflict between the, sort of the style of the case versus the style of the analytical proposition, for which we ask, you're right, we're better off keeping the variables for all the cases. Let's try to answer Jonathan's question by taking maybe a couple of our propositions and then walking it through. I don't, off the top of my head, I can't answer. So we have religiosity.
Sorry, what was it?
So that's, what was that?
6 or 7, you said?
Yeah. So like hypothesis 4 increases in racial diversity interact with persistent
Yeah,
poverty.
so slowly.
Sorry.
Racial diversity increases
Well, actually,
with.
that's maybe not the best one to use. Sorry, this document's so long, it's kind of hard to go through it. Okay, communities with increased levels of immigration alongside increased job loss and high levels of traditionalism are prone to Trump voting.
Okay, that's.
Hypothesis 5.
Hypothesis 5, okay. Where's the reversal of that? I mean, all of those sound clear and straightforward, that all positive, linear, all related. But then where do you get the reversal?
It's contingent on immigration.
It's continued on immigration. So I think it was something like job loss, increased job loss and traditionalism don't both, or increased job loss doesn't lead to Trump voting unless there's also immigration. Is that what
Okay.
it was?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
Okay.
tested if just job loss did and it didn't.
But job loss plus increased immigration did.
Okay, that's an important point. In a sense, a criterion for the case studies of looking for people who may talk about immigration as an issue in Dubuque. Say, for instance, if Dubuque has no or trivial immigration, then contrast Dubuque with a place that looks sort of like that, where immigration is that's almost trivial in the sense that we sort of know about that, but it might be, maybe even better would be to find, well, you have places with no immigration and places with immigration which is variously framed. That is, you can have, the immigrants can be more integrated, but the question is where and how are they integrated? That is, and we all know from the press and our personal experiences, there are all kinds of diverse things, but if we can get 2 or 3 that may then also link with the Trump voting, the simple Putnam story is LA has lots of blacks and Mexicans, and that suppresses everybody's civic engagement. That's Trump's story. That's Putnam's story. And that's a state of, and so you've got other, I've been in a political science panel with 4 other people, and the 3 other people said, no, I'm studying Research Triangle, I'm studying Boston, and I don't find what you report for LA. So, but they've usually had local data rather than national data, whereas Putnam is using his national comparative data, so in a sense that's so. What I'm saying, what I'm leading toward, semi-free associating, is how can we get some cases that would link with this national story? And a key thing as you framed it is, and that certainly fits with a lot of the big discussion nationally, I mean, such as exactly the thing that I heard, which places say kill Muslims? Which towns are, I mean, everybody maybe has been exposed to the same President Obama speech. Let me follow up with one of the related findings. Apparently, he also had, there are a number of Muslim sports heroes and veterans. I think it was veterans. So then they found searches on Muslim sports heroes, Muslim veterans. The next speech by Obama then included a long list of things, not just sports heroes, but also people who were, I've forgotten, skiers or, track winners, or that is, they mentioned Muslims doing many different things as if, and maybe the speechwriter for Obama had incorporated the results of the bad, that is the unanticipated negative negative Google searches generated by Trump's speeches. I didn't make the point. You had nobody said kill Muslims until Obama gave the speech of how good Muslims are. That in turn generated kill Muslims Google searches. That in turn generated the geographic results for those. But then over time, so he's got, in a sense, natural experiments going on of different speeches and in different time periods. And he talked about this stuff in a very, very creative way. So, in a sense, if we could get, maybe it's too hard to get the actual data, but if we could think of, if we could, let's glance at his book. And maybe he discusses, I don't know if he discusses individual cities or not. He didn't mention them on the talk show. But if we could imagine at least, and it doesn't have to be an individual, it could be a type of place where, say, for instance, the key driver is, which he didn't even mention, is education. How much is education just driving all of this? But if we found that, for instance, that some places, such as for instance, in Utah, where you've got more Mormons, that is, do the Mormons embrace, or say Minnesota, classically, Minnesota has been very socially liberal. Generally, Minnesota's been welcoming, and there are more minorities from all kinds of funny places around the world in Minnesota, in part for that reason, I sense.
Yep.
And so, whereas probably Mississippi has the opposite reputation. And so if we get, but what he had, that the book had, was interesting. It's not just north-south. It's getting, that is, and it's not just education. There are differences in the regional cultures, and so Minnesota has, at least in good part, I've had students who've written, BAs and MAs on Minnesota and Vermont. Minnesota and Vermont have got this Elazar moralistic political culture, which is drastically different from the Middle Atlantic, of which Trump is articulating, or the Southern tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, we could try to combine those more general types that we know, that I'm mentioning from Elazar, say, to feed into and to help interpret where and how immigrants are variously accepted or rejected. Does that sound maybe helpful?
Yeah, I think so.
How are you thinking that would be implemented? Like, is that like a? I know I've seen maps that have like Elazar numbers on them, pretty detailed in terms of like geographic areas. But is that like been turned into data set type of information, or
No, I mean, well, for our purposes, short term, we could simply do it with with the maps the way, have you've all seen Mary, at least some of the variations of Mary's paper?
Right.
And she's got the three types with her individual data, but they map onto Trump voting, I think she's got Trump voting as well. And
You said
so-
Mary's data?
Yeah. That is what I'm saying. It's easy with the national data simply to put them into north, middle of the geographic middle and the south, and you're simply using the census categories.
I mean,
that's basically what she did. She did it state by state.
We have the 6 regions
Yeah.
in the data already.
Yeah. Yes. I mean that's a crude way of doing it, but I would say an interesting, a simple but interesting finding that this New York Times guy had was the South was not the most anti-immigrant. I mean, it was rural areas and places that were very much in the news about critical Trump states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. So I mean, so if we could get it, I mean, if the in a sense, I mean, we have to be careful about political sensitivity, but I mean, if we can write this up properly, that there are people who are more anti-immigrant, and then why? I mean, what is there in their worldview which makes them more cautious? I mean, which makes them more extreme in this way, including not just a simple 2 words of kill Muslims, but more generally, what is there about those areas that we could begin to capture? That would be, again, this maybe too much at this stage of the game. But if we can find people who've done this already, like this book, then we don't have to do it from scratch ourselves.
Actually, if this data is accountable, that'd be pretty cool.
They have they break down by like major cities, minor cities. I don't think it's by county though.
What do you say as major cities?
Yeah, major cities, like 180 cities or something.
Why not look at those 180 cities? I mean, that is not all, but if we can just selectively, if he's got some that are extreme and interesting, that's fine.
It's true. And there were a couple of cities on the cases that we brought up too, so we could find like an intersection.
Okay, we're at the end of the hour. Little bits of progress. Thank you, folks. We learned from each other.